You're listening to I Love It When, and I'm your host, Mo. I'm a speaker, coach, and connector. You're in the right place if you're looking for some inspiration and you're ready to truly embrace who you are. My intention with this podcast is to help you see that you are so much more powerful than you realize. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of I Love It When. I'm your host, Mo, and today we're talking about The Emotion Code by Dr. Bradley Nelson. Now, I'm releasing this early because this week I'm headed to Sedona, Arizona for the Manifestation with the Angels retreat. And if you're hearing this, yes, there is still time to come to the retreat. You can purchase your ticket, grab a flight, drive if you're nearby, come and join us. I believe we now have 8 or 9 participants, so we still have space for another 10 people if you wanted to come. So it's not too late. Shoot me a text. You are more than welcome to join us in what I know is going to be a beautiful, loving, supportive, and joyful energy, which I think we could all use more of right now. So I'm super jacked. I just have to tell you guys, I almost didn't record a podcast because I have so many different things that I'm doing before I leave on Wednesday for Sedona. But I was like, no, I have to tell people about this because if you have spoken to me anytime in the last 2 weeks, it's 1:11 right now, and I'm recording this on 11:11. If you've talked to me in the last 2 weeks, you know that I can't stop talking about the emotion code. So I just want to share a little bit why I'm talking about this today. And if you haven't heard about the book before, check it out and just see if you're pulled to it. I was referred to this book by a friend of mine at the Federal Way Keller Williams office when I taught there back in October 2023. Jay Wendelberg is a friend of mine down there, and he came up to me in my classes about be you and your being yourself on social media. But what a lot of people don't realize is in that class, it's less about like the technical aspects of social media and more about how to truly step into your power and be you and speak your truth. And so Jay came up to me at some point during the class and he was like, I have to tell you about this book, The Emotion Code. Have you heard of it? And I think at that point, I had never even seen it or heard of it or anything. And so he shared with me a little bit about it. And Jay has an amazing story, but I'm going to leave that story to him to tell at some point. He was able to release what Dr. Bradley Nelson calls is a heart wall, which is basically like trapped emotions around your heart. And it just gave him such immense immediate relief and opened him back up to the idea of dating again. And now, sitting here as I speak in November of 2024, Jay found a partner, has a beautiful relationship, just recently got married. Congratulations, Jay, if you're listening to this. I will always be grateful to you for having introduced me to this book and pushing me to get it and read it. So I kept putting off reading the book. I got the book, but I just didn't read it. And then one of the great things about being a coach is oftentimes I usually always read a book before I have my clients read it or my small group coaching ladies who work with me read it, but I just felt called to read it alongside them. So I said, okay, you guys, I think we're supposed to read this book next. And so as soon as I picked it up within the first chapter, I was like, oh my goodness, what the heck? Because if you know me and you've listened to any of these episodes, you know I talk a lot about energy and I work with energy. I'm an energy healer. And I've started incorporating this work into my coaching, the workshops I do with corporations, retreats, all of it, because I've seen the impact and I see the results. So when I hear of a new technique or something that could assist in this, I just get really, really excited. Now, if you're watching, this is the first time watching an episode, welcome. Welcome to I Love It When. And I want to explain how this works. So everything is made of energy, including if you're watching YouTube, I'm holding up my AirPods case. I'm holding up my water bottle. Everything is made of energy, absolutely everything. And energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be moved. Now, your thoughts and your emotions, which you can't see with your own physical eyes, they are also energy. And so sometimes if we go through events in our lives that are hard for us, like traumatic events, or it could be even like just today, actually, I dropped a glass bowl out in the kitchen that was filled with rice and it broke and glass went everywhere. If you don't fully feel the feelings that come up for you, if you stuff them down, if you suppress them, that becomes stuck in your body in different ways. And so taking this AirPods case, for example, if we say this is frustration or grief from something that happened that I didn't fully feel and release, it could get stuck in my shoulder and it could start to irritate my shoulder and literally show up on my body as a pain in my shoulder or a pain in the neck or wherever it chooses to land. It could land anywhere in the body. And so, what I've become really focused on is finding different ways to help people release these trapped emotions. And this book, I feel like, has just 10x'd that. And so, as I started reading it, I was like, oh my gosh, I already want to play with this. And so I started to play with it. Now, I'm not certified yet. So I want to put that out there. I'm not a certified practitioner. I do plan on getting certified because I'm going to start using this within my coaching sessions. But as of now, I've just been asking for people to volunteer. And then also, the cool thing about this is after today's episode, you should be able to actually try this on your own. And it's totally safe. The other piece that I love about this is that you don't have to relive your trauma in order to release the stuck emotions. And I think that's really key here, because even though I have my master's in social work, I'm not a licensed therapist. And so I always make that clear in my work. But I always encourage people to see a therapist if they need to and understand that they're also capable of healing themselves. And I think this book is going to be really pivotal, if that's a word. I just gonna warn you right now, ever since I got, number one, I got a healing about a week and 2 days ago from a new healer that I just met that I think totally like elevated my frequency. And then I've probably done 5 emotion code sessions in the last week since I've gotten so excited about this. So I'm like riding this high that I'm letting myself ride, because when you are in this emotion of joy and this frequency of like, uh, joy is really the best way to describe it. It can be very healing for yourself, but also for other people. And with everything that's going on in the world, with everything that's happening in the US, I think it's really important right now to maintain a balance, feel your feelings, express what you need to express, and also take care of yourself. So, okay, those things being said, that's why I'm talking about the emotion code today, because I'm only 5 chapters into this, you guys. I have not finished the book, but I'm already seeing results. And so I have to share when things like this happen. I think this is also part of my purpose, which is why I'm here. So I already said this in one way, but I want to read what Dr. Bradley Nelson says on page 6 about the emotional experience in a nutshell of what happens with emotion in your body. So 3 things happen when we experience an emotion. First, our body generates the emotional vibration. Second, we begin to feel the emotion and any thoughts or physical sensations that come along with it. Third, we choose to let the emotion go and we move on after a few seconds to several minutes. The last step is called processing. And once it is completed, we have successfully moved on from the emotional experience and it shouldn't cause us any problems. However, if either the second or the third step is interrupted, the emotional experience is incomplete and the energy of the emotion is likely to become trapped in the body. So that's just another way of saying what I just said earlier on. Like, if you don't feel the feelings, they will get stuck. Now, I want to give you a bit of an agenda for some reason, and this might be because maybe there's certain people who are listening who want to skip to certain parts. So today I'm going to share one of his success stories that he shares in the book about a guy who has tennis elbow. I'm going to share an example of something that happened with my mom, Mary Smith, who I did this with on Monday of this last week. I'm going to share a story from my friend Kristen Wise, who I did this with on Wednesday night and then again on Friday. And then I'm going to go through the emotion code experience myself right here so that you can see me and hear me do the releasing of a trapped emotion around the dark. So there's all sorts of things you can think of, and I'll talk about this more later too, that you can look at releasing. So I've asked, like, do I have any trapped emotions related to my allergy of dogs? Do I have any trapped emotions related to my allergies in general? Because I have lots of allergies. Do I have any trapped emotions related to a certain relationship with someone? Do I have trapped emotions related to my fear of the dark? Do I have trapped emotions related to my hip pain? Do I have trapped emotions related to my varicose veins? So you can see, you can ask about anything. You can ask about a particular event. Do I have trapped emotions related to this, whatever happened? And so you can start to think about some of the things you can play with this. Then I'm going to, after I go through the process myself and show you what that looks like, I'm going to just talk a little bit about the magnets and why the magnets work. and then or why they were part of this process, and then share how I'm going to be integrating this into my work. So there's a little bit of the lowdown of what we'll be talking about today for those of you that need to hear that. So I've already shared a little bit about why this is important to me and my desire to share it with the world. I will just say again that I'm just such a firm believer that we are all our own best healers, and that when you feel called or pulled to something in particular, it's because your body, your soul, your heart, that energy that flows within you is pulling you to it for a reason. And as you begin to discern the difference between your intuition and fear or ego, and why you're being pulled and what is pulling you, the easier it will get for you to trust yourself. Because that's really key here, to be able to trust that you're being pulled to something for a reason and that it's to benefit you. All right. So the first story that I want to share is, if you have the book, it's on page 58, and it's about this guy named Jack. And I should also mention too, like he says in the beginning of the book, this research is very much brand new and still being looked at and shared and researched essentially. So he mentions in the book, like, this is by no means supposed to replace your doctor or completely replace anything that you're doing for your health. This is just to be seen as something that you can do in addition to those things. Okay. So Jack's tennis elbow. Another example of how trapped emotions can cause physical pain came from a patient of mine named Jack. He was 42 years old, and when he came to me for treatment of his excruciating tennis elbow, which he'd been suffering from for months, the discomfort in his right forearm had become so great that he could no longer even turn the key to start his car without terrible pain. I began treating him with a traditional chiropractic approach and physical therapy. After working on him for about a week, I didn't see much improvement, and that surprised me. Tennis elbow is an ailment that is normally treated very successfully with chiropractic care. I was frustrated with Jack's lack of progress. This was in the early days of my work with trapped emotions. I was just beginning to understand how powerful trapped emotions can be and how they can cause many different kinds of symptoms. I knew they could cause physical pain, but I also knew that tennis elbow was an inflammatory condition that I had treated successfully before. However, since I wasn't getting any results from the traditional approach, I decided to ask Jack's subconscious if trapped emotions were an underlying cause of his tennis elbow. I was a bit surprised when his body answered yes. Using the emotion code, we identified the first emotion. According to his body, the trapped emotion was inferiority. It had become trapped in his body during high school and had to do with a certain girl that he liked. I released it, and Jack was surprised by the immediate and noticeable decrease in his elbow pain. I asked again if there were any trapped emotions that we could release. His body answered yes, and we found that the next trapped emotion was also from Jack's high school days and was the result of a short and unsatisfactory relationship with a different girl at this time. The trapped emotion was nervousness. When we released it, Jack's elbow pain lessened even more significantly. We continued this process until we had removed a total of 5 trapped emotions. They were all from high school, and each emotion involved a different girl. His wife, who was there with him during his treatment, seemed amused. As we released each trapped emotion, the discomfort level in Jack's forearm noticeably decreased. The moment we released the last emotion, his pain was completely gone. He turned his arm this way and that. He imitated turning the key in his car. There was no pain whatsoever. He had suddenly regained full range of motion in his elbow joint. So there are countless stories like this in his book. And I wanted to share at least a few of these with you, including some stories that I have for you from this week in my own personal experience, because reading story after story after story, it got my curiosity so heightened that I had to try it myself. And I think curiosity is key here, opening your mind up and being curious. All right, so now you've heard a little bit about the process, and so I'll just describe it briefly here. What he does is Dr. Bradley Nelson has us use muscle testing in order to connect with your subconscious. Now, I've mentioned here on my podcast before that your subconscious is responsible for 95% of your day. You're eating, breathing, digesting, moving, walking, running, reading, well, all these things that you do without even having to think about it consciously. Only 5% of our actions throughout the day are something that we're consciously doing. All right. So I want you to keep that in mind. So what we're doing here is we're connecting with your subconscious. Your subconscious is like a computer program. It remembers everything. Even if you can't remember having a feeling about something when you were an infant, your subconscious can. And so that's what we're connecting with here. So he gives you, I think, 4 or 5 different ways to do this. You can do the sway test as an example of one where you stand with your feet about hip length apart. And what you do is you ask yourself a question that has a positive outcome or positive answer. So, or you make a statement like, I could say, my name is Margaret Smith, which is truth. And within about 10 seconds, you should feel your body naturally want to sway forward. And that is what a yes looks like. Okay, that's what we're establishing here. Then you make a statement that's not true. My name is Bob, and you should feel your body want to sway backwards. So he gives about 4 or 5 different ways to do that. And then he also gives another way using a pendulum. You can also use a string with a paper clip attached at the bottom. But this is my favorite way to do it because I've just found that so far, muscle testing myself doesn't seem very effective. It's hard for me to discern clear yes or no. I think it will probably be easier for me to do it on other people. But for now, for myself, for my own self testing, I'm using a pendulum. Right. And so I'll show you later on. But if you're watching here on YouTube, if I ask, show me what a yes looks like, it swings forward to backwards. For me, that's my yes. And this is what establishing a baseline looks like. Show me what a no looks like. And it goes left to right. All right. So that's what he describes as part of the process and how you connect with your subconscious. Then you ask it a question. Do I have a trapped emotion related to the dark, for example, for my example? And if it says yes, then you locate the emotion using his chart, which if you Google emotion code chart, you'll find the chart. And essentially, these are emotions that he has researched, these 60 emotions that basically encapsulate all possible emotions that could come up in your body. And they're all connected to different organs as well. And so once you ask, do I have a trapped emotion related to the dark? Then you locate that trapped emotion on the chart, which I'll show you in a few minutes. And then you ask, is it safe for me to release this trapped emotion? And if it says yes, then you take your magnet, which you can just use like a fridge magnet, like I have here, this little one that's shaped like an arrow, and you take it and you hold it over between your eyebrows, which is your third eye, up over your head. And I like to touch my head. You don't have to. He says you can run it like right above. You don't have to be touching your head, but I like to do it all the way. And you run it over your head and down to the base of your neck 3 times while holding the intention of I release whatever this trapped emotion is. So if it's fear, I release fear. I release fear. I release fear. And you can do it 3 or more times. And what you're doing essentially is as you're holding that intention and sending that energy, this is your governing meridian along the top of your head. You're sending that signal to all the rest of your meridians. Hey, we're releasing this now. We're releasing this now. And that's what happens. And literally, once you release a trapped emotion, he says it's never possible for it to come back. It is gone. So that's just an example. I wanted to share that the basic process with you. Okay, now my mom. So I was over at my parents' house this last Monday and I didn't plan on being there, getting some stuff fixed in my car. And I happened to have my book with me. I was like, hey, do you guys mind if I like practice this on you? My parents are so nice. And so they're also always so willing to participate. So they said, sure. So I started with my mom first. And when you first start using a pendulum, if you haven't done before, if you've never done muscle testing, it can take a while to connect with your energy. So I just want to say that. So don't get discouraged if you feel like it's not swinging very well, or if like you feel like you have unclear answers. There are a couple of things you also always want to make sure that you have when you're doing this. So you need a magnet. You either need a pendulum or you need to learn one of the muscle testing processes. And you need to be well hydrated. So if you're thumbs up. If your body is not well hydrated, the energy is much harder to read. So if you're not getting a clear answer, I would make sure that you go drink a cup of water or like make sure that you are hydrating along the way. I say this as an energy healer too. After you have an energy healing session, I will always tell people, make sure to drink like more water than you think you need. Because in order to keep the energy flowing, after you release energy from your body, you've essentially created all this space. So your body is literally like realigning itself and stuff is moving around. And you want to help that with the water. Okay. So you want to make sure you're hydrated. If you're still not getting clear answers, the only other thing he said or there's 2 other things that could be happening. You might have a bone out of alignment in your neck. I feel like that's pretty rare. And then lastly, if you are hugely skeptical or you don't want to really try this, but you're like forcing yourself to do it, it's not going to work. because you have to be open. Like literally, energy, when you meet someone, you can usually tell, right, if they're super open to something or if they're very closed off. You have to be in a place of being open to this in order for it to work. Because your energy can read that and your energy will work with that, with your intention of like, hey, I am closed off. This is just what happens. So hydration, being open, and the possible bone out of alignment in your neck. Those are the three things that can hinder this process. Okay. And so I had my mom start out by using a string with a paper clip attached at the bottom because I didn't have my pendulum. And I had her just practice using it. And she got some yeses and some nos. And then I was like, all right, here, I'll do it for you so that we can go a little bit faster. You can see what it feels like. And so I can do this as a coach, as a surrogate, essentially for someone. I just pause for a minute. I tap into my mom's energy, which really just means like I imagine a cord between my stomach and hers. And I ask her, are you okay with me connecting with your subconscious? And the person has to say yes again. Um, and so then I said, okay, do you have any pain anywhere in your body right now that we can ask about? And she said, yes, in my right shoulder, actually. Now, my mom fell about 15 years ago. It's kind of a hilarious story. We were watching The Bachelor, I think, and she got up to get a cookie, and we were in an older house of ours that had these like linoleum wood floors. I think they were vinyl wood floors, and she was wearing socks and she just slipped. And so she fell hard on her shoulder and ended up, I don't know if she fractured it or sprained it or something. She had to have shoulder surgery, actually. And so it was very painful. And afterwards, she got PT for it. And at some point, the PT person was like, well, she could only rotate her arm about this far. If you're watching on YouTube, it's like she did not have full rotation of her shoulder left. And the PT was like, well, you don't really play racquetball, so we don't need to, have it go the full length. Looking back, I'm like, what the heck? No, you should have totally done this. Like more PT. But anyway, she doesn't have full rotation of it. And so she's just had some pain there. So I said, great. Okay, let's ask about that. So I asked, does my mom have a trapped emotion related to the pain in her right shoulder? And it said yes. And so then using the chart, we identified what the first emotion was. Now you can only release one emotion at a time. That's very critical to this piece because, and I like how he explains this in the book. Essentially, you can't spiritually bypass, right? You can't pass over the work that you need to do in your life. You also can't emotionally bypass. You can't not feel your feelings. And your body needs to acknowledge every single emotion. It just does. Now, it can do this quickly, I think, when you're naturally processing, but if you haven't and things are trapped, we have to acknowledge them one at a time. And so the first emotion that came up, I might get this wrong, but I think it was just general like worry. Okay, and so I asked, is it safe for her to release this now? And it said yes. And so she took the magnet and she ran it over her head 3 times. And she was like, whoa. And I said, oh, what are you feeling? And she got all over body shivers, is kind of how she described it. And she's like, I've never felt this before, but it's like all over. Now, some people will feel something like this right away. Other people might not. Just know, sometimes it's very subtle because sometimes you have to peel back like an onion, several emotions before you get to the ones that might be causing most of the pain. And so she got full body shivers though. And I was like, oh, yay. Okay, that means it's working. And so we asked, did she successfully release that emotion? And it said yes. And we went on to the next one. And I said, okay, does my mom have another trapped emotion related to her right shoulder? And the next emotion that came up was discouragement. And I asked, is it safe for her to release this emotion now? And the pendulum swung no. Now, whenever it swings no, it just means that your conscious brain, I believe, or your logical brain needs a little bit more information. It needs to know, like, where's this coming from? Is it coming from when she fell and hurt her shoulder, or is it something else? And so the next thing you do is you ask about a time frame first. So I asked, okay, is this trapped emotion from between the ages of 0 to 10? No. 10 to 20? No. 20 to 30? No. 30 to 40? No. 40 to 50? Yes. And so we narrowed it down the time frame from 45 to 50 years old. And so I asked my mom, I said, do you know like what happened during that time frame? Is something coming to mind where this could have come from? And she said, well, actually, yes. Like right before I turned 50 is when I was diagnosed with lymphoma. Boom. And so I asked, is this trapped emotion from her diagnosis of lymphoma? Yes. Is it safe to release it now? Yes. So again, she ran the magnet over her head and again got full body shivers. Full body shivers. And I think what the full body shivers just means for her is that these two emotions were pretty big, and that they were big enough that her body is actually rearranging itself because, again, we've freed up space. So if you don't get shivers, it's okay. I have not actually gotten shivers myself doing this. I've gotten very subtle, light liftings, like feeling like lighter off of my chest. Um, and I'll share more of that later, but I wanted to share that story about my mom. So we released one more emotion after that. And the third emotion, she didn't feel any shivers that time. And then I went to my dad and I did a couple emotions on him as well. Another story I want to share with you is I did a session this last week with my friend Kristen. And Kristen has an experience with a lot. If you're a woman out there who goes through a menstrual cycle every month, you know that some people experience really horrifyingly painful periods. And Kristen experiences a lot of period pain. And so I asked her in the moment, I said, "Hey, would you be willing to let me practice this on you and see if we can bring you some relief?" And she said, yes. She's so good about this. And also, the cool thing about this that I've recognized is that when I do this process with healers, the really cool thing is because they tend to be very in touch with their intuition and they can see images. As we were doing it, it was like Kristen and I were both getting messages at the same time. And it was so cool to see all the different things that were coming up. And so, one of the emotions that came up for Kristen was despair. And when I asked, "Is it safe for her to release this feeling now?" it said no. And what we were able to identify through different other additional questions was that this despair not only belonged to her, but belonged to her ancestors. So for those of you that have not heard this before, you might be like, "What, Margaret? What do you mean belong to her ancestors?" Well, it has been proven. Now, I didn't look this up. I should have looked this up to state where this is from, but it's been scientifically proven that emotions can get passed down through your DNA. So meaning like one of the feelings that I've released in the last couple of weeks was abandonment. And my grandmother, my mom's side, my mom's mom, absolutely felt abandonment when she was younger. And so if those feelings are not released, they can be held in the body. And then if you're a woman and you have a baby, held in your womb and passed down. Let that sink in. So yes, I have felt abandonment at different points in my life. Uh, it was amplified because it was in my grandmother first. So same thing for Kristen. She felt despair, but it wasn't just hers. It belonged to multiple ancestors on both her mom and her dad's side. So she actually, when I told her I was going to record this podcast today, I asked if I could share this story. I asked my mom and Kristen, "Are you guys okay if I share what happened for you?" And they were both like, "Yes." I'm so grateful to them for saying yes, because it just gives more to share with you guys. Kristen actually offered to send in an audio clip to share with you guys the impact of that session because she really wanted me to record it. But I was like, "No, this is your first session. There's a lot going on here. This is very deep. We don't need to record this. Like nobody else, needs to see this." We did record her second session, which I might share clips of in the future, but she wanted to send in an audio clip. So here's a clip from Kristen sharing about her first experience with me and the emotion code.
After watching Mo do the emotion code and watching how effortless it came to her and how easy this was for her, and it was something that I had never been able to accomplish myself, I was tickled pink when she asked if we could do a session together. In this session, I was able to release so much emotion. I was shaking, I was crying, I was getting messages from my ancestors. I was totally submersed and feeling in the deepest way I'd ever experienced in my entire life this letting go, this releasing, this healing, not only for myself and these emotions that I had been carrying in my cells and my DNA, but also that I had been carrying around from my ancestors who had had these stored emotions in their body. Being able to release this deep feeling of despair from my body, from my cells. I'm getting chills even just talking about it. Was one of the most profoundly revolutionary healings that have ever happened to me. It's so supernatural. I wish it had been recorded so that everyone could see how much was released in such a short period of time. I now feel so much lighter. I feel so much more confident. It's like something was removed from me that was never supposed to be there in the first place. And I am so grateful to Margaret's technique of using the emotion code to help me release this.
Okay. So thank you so much, Kristen. Thank you, Mom, for letting me share those things with you, and sharing, and for letting me share these things with the audience. I think nothing is more impactful, honestly, than personal stories of our friends and family, right? It just makes all the difference in the world. And it also just brings me so much peace and joy and excitement. If there is something like this that I can provide to my friends and family that gives them relief, um, there's nothing that brings me more joy than that. So, all right, now I want to go through the emotion code process myself, just so that if you're listening or watching, you can see it in action. So I always put every podcast episode up on YouTube. Um, so if you're listening now, that's okay. If you're listening through, Spotify or Buzzsprout or whatever, Apple Podcasts, you can go to the YouTube channel and watch this process later on if you like. So what I'm going to ask about today is something that I've already been asking about. I've, of course, being who I am, there were a lot of different things I wanted to ask about because I'm a very curious person. So I've hopped a little bit. I haven't stuck with one thing and released all the emotions around one thing. I've kind of hopped around. The most that I've done are I've released now probably 12 emotions related to my allergies. Uh, but today I want to ask about the dark. So far, I've released in relation to the dark fear, self abuse, which is really interesting, nervousness, terror, and humiliation. And all of this makes a lot of sense. If you've known me, I've talked about this before on the podcast, my fear of the dark, and how this has come up um, in so many ways, and how one of the things that prompted me actually to learn more about my intuition was my fear of the dark and fear of seeing spirit, because I don't want to ever allow fear to rule my life and influence my decision making. I want my decisions to be made from a place of love. Okay. So first, I know I'm hydrated. Let me take another sip of water. I like to have both my feet on the floor. I'm either standing usually or sitting with my feet uncrossed because again, you want the energy flow to be seamless. I'm hydrated. I feel good. So now I'm going to establish a baseline. Okay. Hopefully you guys can still hear me well. I'm switching from my microphone to my AirPods so that I can have more space to do this without having to reach around the microphone. Okay. Show me what a yes looks like. Thank you. Show me what a no looks like. Thank you. Left to right. All right. Do I have a trapped emotion related to the dark? It says yes. Okay. So now using the emotion code chart, I first ask, is this trapped emotion in column A? Yes. And just so that you guys can see this and hear it, is this trapped emotion in column B? No. Okay. Is this trapped emotion in an odd row? Big yes. Okay. Is this trapped emotion in row 1? Yes. So this will be in the heart or small intestine is the organ associated with it. Is this trapped emotion abandonment? No. Okay. Is this trapped emotion betrayal? No. Okay. Is this trapped emotion forlorn? Yes. Okay. Big yes. So you can go through the other emotions and ask, but I trust it now that I've been doing it. You'll see for your logical brain if you want to go through the rest so that you get a no from the other ones. But again, remember, you can only do one at a time. So I got that it's forlorn is the feeling in the heart or small intestine. So now I need to ask, is it safe for me to release this emotion now? No. Okay. I guess this is a good one to use as an example for you guys. All right. So it wants us to ask more information. Is this emotion between the ages of 0 to 10? Big yes. Okay. Is it from the ages of 0 to 5? Okay, so it's 5 to 10. Does this emotion also belong to my ancestors? It says no. Okay. So we know it's now between the ages of 5 and 10, which makes sense to me. Um, it makes sense to me because as I start to remember more, like I don't remember a lot from being that little, between 0 and 5, especially, but 5 to 10, I know it was around there when I started to really be more aware of the dark and just aware that I didn't like it and aware that it had like a fear of something being there. So now I can ask, is it safe for me to release this feeling now? Yes. Okay. So just wanted me to identify that age range. Okay. I'm actually going to take out my hair clips so that I can do this properly. So I'm releasing the feeling of forlorn. And so I'm just going to hold that intention. I release the feeling of forlorn while I run this over my head 3 times. You release the feeling of forlorn. And you can see I did that more than 3 times because number one, again, you want to make sure that nothing else is like that your mind is clear as much as possible. Because if you're thinking about, oh, I'm hungry, I might want to have lunch, your body might be responding to that. So I have to remind myself, like, and I see the words in my head, I release the feeling of forlorn and I hold that intention as I'm doing it. So then we ask, did I successfully release that feeling of forlorn? Yes. Thank you. All right. So then I've been keeping track of them in my journal. So I will write down forlorn and put a check mark next to it. So that's been my process for releasing as I go along and keeping track of them. And that's essentially the emotion code process. Okay, let me bring my other microphone back now. Right. I'm back with my regular microphone again. Now, the last piece that I want to go over before I end this podcast for today, just to give you guys this. I know I'm like, so there's a lot of information coming out here, but I wanted to give it out there. Magnets. Why the magnet? Why does the magnet work? So on page 94 of the book, he starts to talk about magnets and what it is about the magnets that work. Now, scientists have already identified that we have an electromagnetic field from our heart that emanates out from our body like 8 to 12 feet from your body in all directions. Okay. So again, keep in mind everything is made of energy. And so the first ingredient in this whole process is your intention, a powerful form of thought energy. Your intention is a thought, it is an energy. Okay. And so as you run that magnet over your governing meridian, it sends that message down to all the other points in your body with that intention, with that energy. Like imagine it like this little, again, like my AirPods case, the energy of the intention starts up here, and I am sending this little block of energy down through my entire body, sending a signal, release this, release this, release this. And so that's why interacting with energy in this way is so powerful because you can do it yourself. He even says in another part of the book, like if you don't have a magnet, it's not the end of the world. Use your hand. You can use your hand. Now magnets have a stronger pull, but that's literally how it magnifies the power of your intention, and that's why it works because we're interacting with the governing meridian. Now, there's a lot more parts to this, but I really just felt a big call to get on here and share just what's happening so far in just these first 2 weeks, literally, of reading the book and going through this process with myself. I've now released probably 30 to 40 emotions around different things, and I feel the difference. I feel it physically. And now, I mean, even, gosh, one last story. Even last night, I was doing some work in the kitchen and I was bending over to get something. And I all of a sudden, when you suddenly tweak out your back, like I just tweaked this part of my back and felt this muscle under my left shoulder blade. And I was like, oh God, no. I don't want to travel and go to a retreat with this, an absolutely like an inability to move my body easily. And so I got upset and I was like, all right, let's go straight to the emotion code. So I went straight to my office, pulled out the book, and it's a lot it's very painful. The pain level was probably at like an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being very painful. It was 8. And I knew that if I didn't take it slow and do something about it, it was going to get worse and probably creep across the middle of my back. And I'm also a stomach sleeper, which is not great, right? But so I also knew that I was not going to be able to sleep on my stomach that night, which sometimes results in me not sleeping that well. And so I went straight to the book, and I didn't even write down what emotions I released. I just went for the first 3 emotions that came up, I released those. And then I was like, okay, now I really need to do something physical. So I got an ice pack, and I sat in a chair with the ice pack on and put a little bit of salve on my back. And I just rested the rest of the night, which was hard for me to do because there's a lot of things I wanted to do. Like I was even going to record this podcast yesterday. And then I slept on my back. And now when I woke up this morning, like, oh, no joke, even now, moving it all around, I'm trying to be gentle, but I'm also like wanting to test it. The pain has gone down to where it's barely there. Like it might be a 1.5 or a 2. Like it's healed. It's healing much, much faster. And so I can't not talk about this or not share about this as I'm experiencing it. And I'm experiencing it with other people that I've been doing this with. And so, yeah. So thank you if you've listened to this far. I will be sharing more about this as I go along. And like I mentioned before, I'm going to be integrating this into the work that I do with clients. I already have. And I'm going to be integrating this into workshops and retreats once I'm certified. So let me know if you get the book. Let me know if you try this process. I would love to hear how it goes for you. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here.